Welcome to the Smart Business Revolution.
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 You want a revolution?
You say you want a revolution?
Revolution. The revolution.
It's going on right now.
Welcome to The Revolution, the Smart Business Revolution podcast, where we ask today's most successful entrepreneurs to share the tools and strategies they use to build relationships and connections to grow their revenue. Now, your host for The Revolution, John Corcoran.
All right, welcome everyone. John Corcoran here. I'm the host of this show. Every week I get to talk to smart founders, CEOs, and entrepreneurs of all kinds of companies and organizations, ranging from Netflix to YPO, EO, Activation Blizzard, LendingTree, OpenTable, Axe Software, many more. This is part of our UC Santa Barbara Top Entrepreneur series where we're profiling entrepreneurs who've come through UC Santa Barbara, either through professors or alumni. And I also, as you know, my background, I'm a recovering political hack, recovering lawyer, spent years working in politics, including as a speechwriter with stints in the Clinton White House and for a California governor. And now I get to have the privilege of talking to great entrepreneurs and founders like today's guest. And first, I want to give a big thank you to John Greathouse for introducing me to today's guest. His name is Paul Orfalea. Paul Orfalea. He is the founder of the Kinko's retail chain, which if you are at least, I would say 30 and above, maybe you have an excuse if you're under 30 for not knowing the Kinko's chain. But even then, you got to know the name Kinko's. It was founded in 1970 in Isla Vista, California, a small community next to Santa Barbara. The Kinko's concept was sparked in 1969 when our guest, then a student at University of Southern California, USC, he noticed his fellow students were lining up at a copy machine in the library, and there was a long line. And he saw an opportunity. So he borrowed $5,000 from a local bank, rented 100 square foot space next to a hamburger stand next to UC Santa Barbara, where I went to school. And this tiny Kinko's with a single copier, 2.5-cent copies, became a huge global brand, 1,000 stores internationally, near their $2 billion in annual sales. And much of the success can be traced back directly to Paul's unique business philosophy, which was based on his free-thinking creative style, which we're going to talk about here today. And of course, this episode is brought to you by Rise 25 Media. Go check us out at rise25media.com. Learn more about how to do podcasts and content marketing the right way. Paul, it's such a pleasure to have you here today. There's so many things I want to ask you about. First of all, I want to start with you. You come from a line of entrepreneurs. Your father actually had a manufacturing women's clothing business in downtown LA, which is where you're from. You had many other relatives who were entrepreneurs or business owners. So it really was in your blood. And there was no question that you were going into this. So tell me a little bit about that with entrepreneurship running in your family. Was it just kind of like from birth, basically, you were predestined to have your own business?
I must have 400 relatives. I'm Lebanese in Southern California. And I never knew a human being that had a job. They had their own business. And I remember in first or second grade, the nun saying, one day somebody's going to look at this report card. And I thought, bullshit, I'm not going to be in that position. So my mother would say, honey, you work for other people. You're only as good as yesterday's paycheck. You work for other people, they throw you away like you're a piece of cattle. They just throw you away. And you're only as good as generally people working for other people don't have a savings account. They have a lot of insecurity. I was just always raised at my own business. And my mother only cared about two things. One was, are you saving your money? The second one, are you sleeping enough? And that's what, I went out of the birth canal. That's what the important thing in my life was, saving and sleeping.
Did you work for your father or any other family businesses when you were growing up?
I got fired from my dad's factory.
What'd you do?
I don't know. I would go there and there was nothing specific. I'd just go from department to department and say, do you need anything done? And a lot of times I didn't look like I was busy. And I would be talking to people and I'd distract them from what their task was. And I think that my dad found that a little irritating.
So he said, you're out of here.
Yeah.
Do you recall what your last job was? Did you have any other jobs
I
then?
had two jobs. I got fired after one day on both jobs. One, I was a fountain boy. That's where you scoop ice cream and they walk by and they say chocolate malt, this, that, and the other. And so I'm scooping that ice cream over here, and it was really hard. And I went like this, and I banged my finger on the wall of the thing, and I bled on the ice cream. So they fired me after that. Then the second one was I was a gas station attendant, and they couldn't read my handwriting for the credit cards. And so I got fired after one day. Both jobs earned $6 in both jobs, as was my severance and my salary.
Wow.
I only had two jobs. And then, but I always worked in commission sales. I liked that. I was a fuller brush man. I was collected for guys' newspaper route, but just basically things you could do on your own.
Yeah. And were you drawn to sales?
Always.
Yeah.
Always.
Yeah. Now, you knew LA, you grew up in LA, you went to USC. This is one thing I want to ask you about. Why did you decide to start Kinko's out of a 100 square foot shop, an hour and a half up the coast in Santa Barbara?
Well, a little bit about myself. I can't read very well. I was Sister Sheila found out I didn't know the alphabet. I was held back in second grade. I had to go to Dr. Walton, a guy for eye circles, Dr. Paul, Dr. Fosdick, Dr. Herr, Dr. Kaywood, just to teach me how to read. And I barely learned I'm not a good reader to this day. So if you can't read and you can't spell and you have no mechanical ability whatsoever, you're going to have to figure it out. I better do it on my own. And so I was at SC, and the guys I worked with wrote a big, thick document, and I had to get a copy. And I saw these people in line, and I thought, man, this might be pretty good. And so I entered the copying business. What I liked about it, too, is what I've noticed was I didn't like fighting inventory. Like my dad was always fighting his inventory of his dresses. My uncles were in the produce business. Overnight, their produce rotted. I kept looking at this paper thinking, God, it's going to be, I can keep this for a year and it's not going to
go bad.
Yeah. And then when, the product life cycle, I didn't have to fight. I had a feeling, knowing the product life cycle, that this was in its infancy.
Oh, because they were new, because copiers were new in the early 70s.
Yeah.
But why did you choose to locate it up the coast? Why next to UC Santa Barbara instead of next to USC?
I had a girlfriend.
Oh, there we go. Okay.
And I noticed that there wasn't a copying place up here.
Yeah. And taking back those early days, you remember, were you staffing it? Did you hire someone to staff it from the early days?
Well, yes, I did. I hated being in the stores. I didn't like binding. I didn't like copying. So after I was still going to USC, and I was driving back and forth, and I'd work Tuesdays and Thursday mornings in the store. But after about a month and a half, I hired a manager. And now, when you think of it, wasn't that manager the president of the company or the chief executive? So I've been the owner my whole life, managing executives, chief executives. So if you conduct your affairs like an owner, which I was a good owner, I was not a good employee or a good executive.
Yeah. What did you learn in those early days? How long did it take before you started adding other locations? Did it take a while?
Yeah. I remember at the first store, I kept thinking, when these students' children go to UCSB, they're going to say to themselves, go see Paul. He did my Xerox copies. And I just didn't want that image for my life. And I kept thinking, well, there's there's lots of Chevron stations, Exxon stations. There's more than one thrifty drugstore at the time. And I kept thinking, well, somebody must have figured out how to go from 1 to 2 locations. Yeah. So I started studying when you grow, what you do with your banking relationships, how you do your deposits, how you organize you do your organizational chart. So I kept thinking about how to do it from the very beginning.
Yeah. And was there anyone you turned to? Was there, were there books at the time? Did you have any mentors?
Well, I think I went to SC and had a business school degree, and I paid attention. I didn't set the world. I got C's, but I can honestly say if I learned it, I remembered it. And there's something about note taking. I never took notes, but I'd say, wow, that's cool. Like the professor in finance said subchapter S. I didn't have to take notes on that. I just remember that's a great way to get out of taxes. Or you're in accounting and the professor says LIFO or FIFO, and you say, wow, I think we're gonna have a lot of inflation. I think I'm gonna be on LIFO. Or you're in microeconomics and you say, my variable cost is such and such. If I have low variable cost, my accounts receivable policy should be very liberal. But if you applied what you learned in school to the real world, it really helped me a great deal going there. Marketing, to all the concepts I learned in business school.
Now, I was watching some interviews you've done previously, and Xerox was a big partner of yours because they produced the machines, right? And you had a trick where you would approach them to buy copiers at the end of the year. Talk about that trick. I love that.
Oh, well, these big companies, if you don't understand, these big companies are stupid. You know what a dinosaur is? You cut the tail off a dinosaur, it takes a minute for the pain to register in its head. These big companies have these goofy accounting procedures. And I encountered a lot of goofy big companies that have things that just defy common sense. So I'd go to Xerox and I'd say, God, that's really cool. You got those new machines. They're really kind of cool. I want to buy like 300 of them. I go to them, say in September or October, so they're getting salvated. I'd say, well, you know what? I'll pay you the list price. Whatever you charge, I'll pay you the list price. But what I want is you to extend the service contract. So I would get 4 years. I could blast away on that machine. Well, when you think of what's a machine, it's just a hunk of metal. Without the repair person, you're nothing. And those damn things broke all the time. So what they would do is they would book the revenue in that year, but there was a contingent liability for all the service that they didn't account on their books. So
the sales guy didn't care. He still gets his commission probably, right?
Well, the big company, they get the $20-30 million sale. And at the end of the year to make their numbers, but for some reason they didn't account for it internally properly.
Yeah, that's funny. Yeah. Now, let me ask you, because you became a big company, your company became a big company. How did you avoid what you just said from happening to you? In other words,
you can't. That damn overhead goes up insidiously, and you got to fight it. It finally wins the overhead. And what happens is every time we made a rule, we had a little problem. We'd make a rule that meant I took away initiative from the person in the field. And so there was a constant battle with overhead and centralization. There's a concept in organizational behavior that organizations start as a lot of independent thinking. For an example, the United States, prior to the Depression, we had a lot of independent thinking. We needed a strong central authority. So we elected Roosevelt and we built a strong federal government. Businesses go from too much independent thinking to too much centralization. The centralization, too much red tape. They finally have to have a purge to get rid of a lot of overhead. But there's always a battle because once you start centralizing, it's inevitable. And you've got to fight it. And every day I fought the overhead. And it's just but you have to understand the government wants to be paid their money. They've got to have a proper accounting procedures. The HR department has a certain way of doing things. The legal department wants to do things. And just as the owner, you're navigating all these various groups and every one of them it's not easy. And then As the owner, you're the last to be paid. You got to pay everybody, the government, everybody. And whatever's left over, you might get this much.
Yeah.
And guess what? That much. Because your business grew, you have more receivables, you have more inventory. It's not like in the checkbook.
Yeah. Yeah. You can see how for any business owner, it becomes tempting to cash out and sell it eventually.
Well, yeah. Why not?
Yeah. Because then you
My
find
business was for sale from day one. Now, I find when people say, I love my business, I think that's a terrible. You love your family. You cannot love your business. You can enjoy your business. But once you start loving it, you're not objective about that damn business. You're not seeing for what it really is.
Right.
Now, for an example, in the 90s, I saw that laser printer coming after me. And I kept thinking that laser printer can do a lot of things we can't do with a copier. And at the time, we were like a darling company. And I'm sitting there owning it going, I'm not quite sure we have a future here. So it was really hard in 1997 to project confidence when I'm feeling so insecure in my heart.
Yeah.
But we successfully sold it in 1997.
Yeah. Now you sold it in two different chunks, right? You sold a portion of it and then a different portion later, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, John Greathouse told me I have to ask you about that. And I've read a little bit about, you had a few regrets about the way that the sale went down.
Oh, no, I didn't have regrets getting the money. I regret it because the way they treated really nice, decent people. Now, do you remember the movie Godfather 1 and Godfather 2?
Sure.
Godfather 1, he built an organization. He had a modicum of scruples. He wouldn't go into drugs. But as long as you're productive, he was okay with you. Godfather 2 was all about loyalty. Are you loyal to me, not to the organization? Remember how he killed everybody at the end?
Mm-hmm.
That's the way it is in these big companies. The first person builds a company, it's an achieving organization. The second person coming in says, are you loyal to me? And what they do is if they're not loyal to them, they let them all go. And I found that was very disconcerting because we're working with some really wonderful people that really had their heart and soul in that business and really loved it. And the way they were treated so ruthlessly and cavalierly by the people from New York. And by the way, the people in New York were liars. I've never believed that people intentionally lied until I met the people from New York.
Yeah. So is there anything that you would do differently, or is there anything that you regret about the sale?
I got the check. And we had a shot. Do you know, 10 years after I sold the business, revenue was down 72%.
Wow.
So, who goes to a copier? What do you do? I don't need copies anymore.
Yeah. Well, this relates to another question I was going to ask you a little bit later in the interview, but it makes sense now. You're such an interesting, innovative, entrepreneurial guy. If you were to continue running the business today, let's say you'd never sold it and you were running it today, what would the Kinkos of today, I see you, the look of disgust on your face, but for example, there's co-working spaces that serve the entrepreneurial startup community. That's what you did, right? So would it have evolved into a co-working space, or what would Kinkos of today look like if you were running it still?
I think it would have evolved to a co-working space because we started getting workstations, and I was designing things where they could be soundproof, so you could do telephone calls inside a booth in one of our stores. We had a way to baffle the noise. That's one possibility. The second one was, and it took a lot. Kinko's was an operating company that sold. We weren't a selling company that operated. And we had to change the whole gestalt of the organization to become a selling company, meaning that every grade school class at the end of the year could have a little booklet, like a memory book, like annual. But every grade you go through, you have one of those. Every funeral could have a memorial thing with some sort of writing about the human being. But that meant that our company had to go from making copies to publishing. And I didn't think we had great operators, but they weren't necessarily good salespeople. And then I kept seeing all the new technology coming our way. And was working with people in their 50s that weren't going to embrace the new technology. So if we probably had a younger workforce that embraced anxiety, we could have figured out a position in the marketplace. But I always felt that we would sell out to FedEx or UPS.
Interesting. Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. I want to circle back to something you were just talking about, the difference between centralized power and individualized thinking. And, you've talked a lot about this, but you gave a lot of power to both to the franchisees and also even to the customer service, to the people at the counter to make a decision. If there was a mistake, they could do whatever it took to rectify it. So talk a little bit about that, about your approach and how that worked for you.
My variable cost was 16 cents. I sold it for $1. Now, a mistake didn't cost me anything. But the problem when you get a centralization is mistakes become too important to the stupid reviews and all that. We had a policy that if a customer complained for whatever reason they complained, we would go along with the customer and say, what can we do to remedy the situation? And the counter workers, the 16-year-old counter worker was empowered to do whatever it took to take care of that customer. Now, of course, when we sell out to the distrustful people from New York, what policy do they reverse instantaneously? How many layers of management do they put in? Mm-hmm. Now, if you want an efficient organization, look at the Catholic Church. Bishop, Pope. Bishop, Cardinal, Pope. There's 1 billion Catholics, 2 layers, 3 layers. I needed 4 layers with 1,000 stores, and they wanted to add a 5th layer. Every layer of management screws things up 20% to justify their existence. So you get the vision here. This layer says, no, I got to tinker it. Then this layer, by the time it gets here, it's usually it's never what you think it is. So I had the organization, it was a really flat organization and empowered. Very few layers of management.
Yeah. I want to ask you about, in the 1980s, you're growing really fast. You realized you needed help. You found a young USC professor named John Davis who recruited to work for you. He stayed there for 2 decades or so. He also helped develop the Kinko's philosophy, which talked about individualized and independent thinking, which we're talking about here. Talk a little bit about your relationship with John Davis.
John is a fantastic person. He's he's organizational behaviorist. So he could come in and analyze your organization, your weaknesses and all that. And so you could just tell he had the spark in his eyes. He knew what he was doing. So I'm really good at getting out of work. Most people will say they're really good at getting out of work. I know how to get out of work. So we needed a statement for our managers and our field people of our priorities. It's sort of like an impressionistic painting versus a realistic painting. I needed some sort of impressionistic painting to say, what are our values? Well, our primary value is take care of our customers. We want to openly communicate. A mistake is okay with us. We want to be good stewards for the environment. Now, what is it? If you say we want to be good stewards for the environment, what is that basically saying? Don't spend a bunch of money, turn off the lights and be a little frugal here. It kind of goes along with business. So we developed our philosophy. It was a statement that you looked at and it kind of guided you every day to make a decision. And sometimes I'd get phone calls from people in the field and I'd say, well, did you read the philosophy? So it's a great way to get out of work.
And you had a laminated copy that you carried around in your wallet for years. I'm curious, do you still carry it in your wallet?
It's upstairs.
You still have it, yeah? Yeah. That's cool. It's interesting. I want to ask about your relationship with your franchisees. And I was reading about it. You didn't believe in treating them with kid gloves. You believed in having sometimes forceful arguments with them about what is the right way to do things. Talk a little bit about that.
They weren't franchisees. I'd find somebody I liked, and if I liked them and they had saved a little bit of money, I'd lend them the money to be my partner.
Got it.
And by doing that, we shared in the profits. What a franchisor is somebody off the top you don't really trust because there's an antagonism there.
So that was a deliberate decision to do it that way?
I deliberately did it that way. I did not like the franchise model. I thought there was a lot of antagonism between the central authority and the field. And I understood that business of ours had to reposition itself constantly. We were a little copy shop around a college campus. Then more and more technology came our way. We started going in the commercial area. Then the entire publishing industry sued us for a publishing program we had for the professors, and we lost real severely. We had to fundamentally repivot the business then. So
how much of your revenue did you lose through that? Do you recall?
You see, it was I'd say about $300 million a year. And if you think that my variable cost was 16 cents on the dollar, that was significant. We were doing, say, 7% of the textbooks at Ohio State.
Wow.
So, yeah, it hurt.
What was that experience like going through that litigation when you were sued by the publishing companies?
I was 2 feet from hell. You know what's a funny story about that? I just had a really good back to school. I had money in the checkbook, and I'm starting to take myself seriously. Driving from LA to Santa Barbara, going, I must take myself seriously now. So that next day, I got sued by the entire publishing industry. And so I said, I'm real superstitious about taking myself serious. I know I'm going to get my ass kicked. And my dad used to say, the biggest reason you fail in life is your past success. It goes to your head. And so it was hell. It was absolute hell. But
did that lead to your decision to sell, or did it contribute to it? No.
The business was for sale from day one. Your business is an instrument to make you happy. You own it. It doesn't own you. I'm a real believer in that. So you're in business to enjoy your life and enjoy your family. And so my problem was my nickname was Kinko because of my hair. I had kinky hair. But the only thing I really ever did capably in my life was Kinko. And so I could have easily been seduced by Kinko, but I wanted to keep Paul in the equation. And so there was a real struggle to be seduced by my business persona or who the hell I really am. And so I was really conscious of that give and take. A lot of people get seduced by their business. They don't own it. They're seduced by it. Let that business own them.
Now, because of the way that you'd structured your relationship with your partners, not the franchisees, but the partners, and because it wasn't a traditional franchise model, there was some legal complexity that had to be overcome when it came time to sale or preparing for sale. So talk a little bit about that.
We wanted to roll up to one big company, and I had 164 various owners. The only thing they all had in common, they were like Minnesota, there'd be 2 or 3 owners, and they were partners with me.
You personally, not Kinko's corporation.
No, because we were a subchapter S, and a C couldn't own an S.
Got it.
And so we had a bunch of subchapter S's around the country, maybe.
So you had 1,000 different locations worldwide, and you had these individual personalized agreements with all these different.
Yeah. The only thing I'd tell somebody, say, I work with some great people. I'd say, now you've got the state of Tennessee. The only thing I want to make sure you are is a subchapter S. I had no written agreements. Just make sure you're a sub S.
No written agreement. So did any of them want to prevent you from selling the company when that happened?
We got them all, 164 of them. It was hard
to agree.
One big roll up.
Did you have to go around to all 164 and get there?
I did. I had to talk them.
Wow.
We're not talking, but you have to understand, here I am talking about selling the company when I don't believe in the future of the company.
Right.
Do you understand? I had a real dilemma.
Yeah.
If you're not a paranoid and you want a business, you got a real problem. I took solace from the fact that Andy Groves, founder of Intel, said, even paranoids have enemies. So I was full on paranoid. And I was right in that perception of when it was time to get out of Dodge. So here's my dilemma. I'm trying to be a cheerleader, but I really don't believe in what I'm cheerleading.
Yeah. That must have been emotionally a fraught time for you.
Yeah, I'd say that 3-4 year period there was when the most anxiety filled time of my life. Maybe the publishing suit was also, or maybe every summer being broke might have been anxiety. But you know what? Anxiety and ambition are best friends.
Yeah, they go well together. I want to ask you about your theory of management, which you credit to your wife, Natalie.
Yeah, ex-wife.
Ex-wife. Tell us about it. Your theory of management.
Management is to remove obstacles. The only reason you have a boss is to make your job easier, not harder. Does it make sense for a boss to say, well, let's go out and burden these poor workers so they can be more unproductive? So I always followed that theory. Your primary job as an executive is to remove obstacles so your people can be more productive.
That must have made you popular with the people that work for you.
No, middle management that didn't necessarily. The managers truly liked me, and they knew I was always on their side.
The managers liked you. The middle management didn't like you, and then the counter workers?
Real managers really liked me because they knew I was always on their side. Middle management, they're a little, I was a little more, I wasn't as delicate as I could have been.
Yeah. I want to get to your post-Kinko's life, but is there anything else that you want to reflect on while we're still on the topic of Kinko's leading up to the sale?
Well, most owners of businesses forget what they do and how it helps people or humanity. For us, what we did every day, we helped somebody get a job. There's a little girl in Spokane, Washington, that was abducted. The family went to the police department first and went to us second to do the posters. Those are powerful connections to earth. And so I always try to remind people what we did for a living really helped humanity in their highest aspiration. You know, you think of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, what we did really helped people aspire to the best and most creative part of themselves.
Wow, that's great.
Just forget to relate what they do. They sell joy, like the bowling alley. We're selling joy. Look at the smiles people have when they come out. I used to own a bowling alley. But people forget to embark. The owner's job is embark the sense of purpose. I go to work to accomplish this for the world. Even if you're opening up envelopes in our receivables department, what you're doing is you're contributing to this. And I put pictures of happy customers and joyous things on the wall, just to remind them what we're doing here is just not opening envelopes and filling out bank deposit forms for the receivables department, putting in forms. You're building something.
That's great. I love that. After you sold Kinko's, you moved into something completely different. So academia and philanthropy and mentorship. You spent a lot of time. You've done a lot of interviews, giving back, like here today. Talk a little bit about what that was like moving into that next chapter, and so different, especially from the world of entrepreneurs and your family that you came from.
I still have my own businesses. I had a lot of businesses. I'm always starting different things. I still kept involved with business, but I would never let a business own any of my time. So that was always my definition of owning a business. What I do now is I can entertain myself very easily. I find the world very interesting. But on the philanthropy side of the house, We live in two different worlds. Christ said, "He who sees the face of the poor sees me." And I just don't know if we are as aware of how people are struggling in this world. Here in Santa Barbara, we live on the coast. We have children that have never seen the ocean. And they live 3 blocks away from the ocean. 50% of our Latino community in Santa Barbara, or Santa Barbara County, don't know how to swim. They don't know how to ride a bike. They've never really been outdoors. Yet I see the affluent children around me having every luxury on earth. So in our philanthropy, we first got involved with preschools. And I'm proud to say that 45% of the preschools in Santa Barbara County are accredited. The closest county to us in California is 9%. We got involved with school food. The biggest common instrument in a cafeteria was a warmer in plastic. They didn't use knives in the kitchen because, I don't know why, but we got food from scratch, healthy food at lunch. We put in nutrition. I don't think children need mid-morning protein. We worked with, now I'm involved with schools, grade schools particularly. We got involved with disasters here in Santa Barbara, and we helped build the disaster center. It's kind of we've had some major disasters.
You have.
Community.
Yeah, so, in your community.
Yeah, right in our community. But anybody who thinks that we're not going to have an earthquake must be taking LSD for brains. And most people aren't prepared with a disaster kit and know what to do with an earthquake.
Nope. Yeah. How did you, when it came time to approach philanthropy, how did you decide between, so many different causes?
It was simple. We lost a child, my wife and I. And I kept seeing, and I remember how, when we had our kids, how difficult these children are, just difficult. And I kept thinking, a single mother, how in the hell does she do it? Here we have 2 parents, I have help at the house, my kids are driving me out of my mind. How does a single mother ever have any balance in life? Yet the big shot is going out to the Easter Seals banquet, acting like big shots, yet the people at work don't have health insurance, their children don't have orthodontia coverage. And I kept thinking, that's my cause, single parents. And so, for an example, lactation is very important. And we changed the lactation policy of our local hospital. I wouldn't give any money unless they taught lactation, breastfeeding. Mm. Normally, the nurse in the hospital says, well, give this damn baby a bottle. It's a lot easier. Well, that's not the key to a baby's health. Lactation, it starts with breastfeeding. In Santa Barbara County, we got our breastfeeding up to about 60%. The national average is about 38% breastfeeding.
Your cousin started Freebird's burrito chain, which is famous to anyone who's from Santa Barbara. And it was right around the corner from where the first Kinko's was. I
tried to work with Mark in opening Freebirds, but I opened a lot of coffee shops just the same time as Starbucks was expanding. Mm. And a companion business for us would be a coffee shop next door.
Definitely.
24-hour dry cleaners. I started that. So I always figured Kinko's was part of a strategic puzzle. And if I opened a 24-hour strip mall with companion businesses, like I went to a 24-hour drugstore, it was just really did well in the 90s. So with the freeway, it just made sense. So I try to start these component businesses, but I started in my 40s. And then by my 50s, I didn't want to work so hard. So I couldn't get the various tenants, my own businesses, to cooperate with us to build centers. Mm. So but I think the concept would have worked well. But I kept looking at department stores thinking, well, how can some fancy department store have food, cosmetics, shoes? Those are all, Kinko's is part of a department store. So that was what my dream was.
So combine it with the Freebirds, so the burrito joint, so you can get 24 hours a day, 3 a.m. if you need to get copies done, and if you need
a cup of coffee, and you got an espresso cappuccino. Yeah,
I'm sold.
Yeah. So I ended up selling a coffee shop chain. We had about 30 of them.
What was the name of it?
Espresso Royale.
Just Aroma?
No, that was another one. We were Espresso Royale. Espresso Royale. Well, it's funny. Proper nouns are kind of you get a little older, your proper nouns don't work as well.
Are you still in any businesses that are interesting that you want to add about?
I have that thing.
Shout out.
Like WeWorks, it's I have one of those in Santa Barbara.
Oh yeah, we did an event at that location actually. Yeah. In conjunction with a conference, we did an event there, hosted an event there. It's a beautiful space. There should be more of those.
I know there should be, but I don't know if I want to be that ambitious again. Then I just sold the bowling alley I owned for 20 years. And believe it or not, bowling is exact same business as Kinko's. Exactly the same business.
Why is that? How so?
You rent time on a machine. You're a time rental business. What do you think a restaurant is? They think they're in the food business. They're in the time rental business. A completely different orientation when you think you're selling time. Because you know what? Restaurants, they can't sell yesterday's time. I can't sell yesterday's hour in that bowling machine or my yesterday's hour on that copier. So most people don't understand they're in the time rental business.
I also want to ask you about, you launched the Orfalea Center for Global and International Studies, which is at UC Santa Barbara. You got to sit down with my old boss, President Clinton, at UCSB, interviewing him. What was that experience like? And also, what was launching the center like?
Well, I met President Clinton, and I think we hit it off. I asked him a couple of questions. I said something that I always admired President Clinton. After the Oklahoma bombing, he went to Oklahoma and said, I'll never call somebody a bureaucrat again. And I just thought, well, that's kind of cool. I mean, you don't call people dirty names and try to motivate them. And then the second one was, and he was in Africa once. I could see panic in his eyes because I think that he thought the crowd was rushing him. And I asked him about that. And he said, no, a woman had fainted in the front row. But those are two obscure questions I don't think he was ever asked. So we had a rapport and we visited. And I think he thinks we have a rapport.
Mm-hmm. In the center, what motivated you to get behind that?
It studies transformational peace, and the guy, a great professor named Mark Juergensmeyer, wrote a book on religion and conflict, and I like what we did there. We were at one point a few years ago going to bring his supposition is that the root of it is the religious conflict. If you can get all the religious people together recreating, you could maybe bring some transformational change in the Middle East. So we had a meeting with the big shot rabbis and the big shot mullahs, and they were all going to come over here. They all had their special pots and pans, but we had it set up. But then a war broke out in the Middle East, and we couldn't get it done. No. But he's just a fantastic human being, and he started the department.
Yeah, that's great. Paul, it's such a pleasure talking with you. I want to wrap things up. Before I do, last question that I enjoy asking, which is, I'm a big fan of gratitude. So if you look around at your peers and your contemporaries, however you want to define that, who do you respect? Who do you admire?
Well, I must answer two things. First of all, in my career, I was under so much financial pressure. I never said enough thank yous to people. And I was really bad at thank yous. And so I didn't show enough gratitude. And I found, in reflection of my life, that a thank you was probably the best motivator there was, so just an act of appreciation. And I didn't do it enough. But the person I respect most is Yvon Chouinard. He owns Patagonia, a man of absolute integrity, the way he conducts his affairs, the way he is a steward of the environment. He has a daycare center at his headquarters. He just does things right for the right reasons. And I admire him. That's probably number one on my list of people that practice what they preach.
That's great. Paul, it's such a pleasure. Where can people go to learn more about the work that you do these days, or learn more about things you're interested
in? The Audacious Foundation.
Audacious Foundation.
Yeah. And
great.
Yeah, I don't believe in, I'm going to be giving all my money away. I don't see any purpose to hoarding it. I mean, there's so much need out there.
Yeah. Good. Thank you.
I mean,
sir.
and it's not at the Opera House.
Yeah. The opera is doing okay. Yes.
Opera and the Playhouse, they're all doing real well. They don't need my help. It's the people waiting on you at the table, the cooks, the people trying to live on minimum wage, who don't have health insurance, that their children don't have orthodontia. One of the proud programs we pay for orthodontia for Title I children. And, every year we pay about 300 orthodontia children with fixing their teeth. And I have to tell you, that you get a compounded rate of return society from orthodontia. Better job prospects, less incarceration, just better prospects for college. If you can smile and be happy with your smile, you got an advantage in life. Well, that's one of the things I'm real proud that we do.
That's great. Paul, thank you so much. We'll be sure to link that up in the show notes.
Okay, thank you. Take care of yourself. Enjoy our time, John.
Thank you for listening to the Smart Business Revolution podcast with John Corcoran. Find out more at smartbusinessrevolution.com. And while you're there, sign up for our email list and join the revolution. Revolution. And be listening for the next episode of the Smart Business Revolution podcast.